off massive shout out to Kindred Kitchen. I'm so stoked that I've had the opportunity to come out tonight to do a presentation and have a yarn with the South African community over here. You haven't tell from my accent, I am from Australia, but I have spent a fair bit of time in South Africa over the years. So yeah, much appreciated, Sim and the rest of the Kindred crew. So my talk today, the topic is veganism towards an earth-centered culture. And so what I want to address is really building upon some of my experience in terms of my studies, in terms of my personal interest, and some of my realizations throughout my life, which have contributed towards an internal transformation within myself in the way that I see the world. And so what earth-centered culture is about, I'll elaborate on it shortly, but essentially what we're looking at is shifting the paradigm, shifting the worldview, and really starting to look at the ways in which we've interacted and related with the rest of the natural world. Really start analysing our behaviours, our values, our beliefs, and to be quite serious with looking at them and being quite frank with the consequences that our choices are having on ourselves, on the planet, humans, non-human animals, everything. And so this picture here, for me, really illustrates in its simplest form what the transition between paradigms can look like. So over on the left-hand side, we have the ego approach, the ego worldview, and we have the eco worldview on the right-hand side. Now, we can see it's the simple structure is that there are some hierarchies over here, and there's less of a hierarchy over here on the right-hand side. And so if you can remember this slide, it's probably one of my favorite slides, and for me it can sum up so much about this presentation. So, firstly, this anthropocentric worldview, this human-centered worldview, this is the current paradigm. This is the dominant paradigm, the main school of thought, the main worldview that is prevalent within our society. And so this worldview is a human-centered worldview. And so within this worldview, we've got a number of different components. And so you can see the most simple thing is we have this human superiority. For a very long time, we've seen humans as the most important species. It's been human interests over everything else. We have these hierarchies. We also have something called speciesism. And so within these hierarchies, we've seen ourselves as the most important, and then with other animals and other life forms as being less important in terms of their value. Now, often we've used these human constructs like intelligence, their ability to experience pain, and then given animals a value based off of that. We've commodified nature. We've seen nature as a resource. We look at the words that we use and really think about what are we trying to say. We have a dollar price on trees and on things that are just naturally existing here on this planet. We have non-human animals as property. We've objectified and commodified non-human animals. Now, this has all been focusing on the extrinsic value of nature and not the intrinsic value of nature. In contrast to this, we have the ecocentric worldview, which is the earth-centered worldview. And we start diversifying our thoughts. We start looking at a bigger picture beyond our experience as humans and realize, okay, perhaps we are part of a broader Earth community. That the rest of life on Earth is not a collection of objects, but perhaps a communion of subjects. Now, it's looking beyond human interest to look at the whole interest of nature as a whole, which we are an integral part of nature. We are nature. Nature is within us. Nature is not something separate to us as humans, right? But it's this false belief that we are separate from and more superior to the rest of nature. This really starts challenging that and turns it on its head, right? So the thing is, we have that anthropocentric worldview, and this belief system has been so deeply entrenched within our society. It's become institutionalized. So from everything from education, government, law, business, finance, religion, everything, we've seen this human-centered worldview has been so prevalent. And they've been driving so many things on our planet. They've infiltrated our minds and our hearts, the way we view and interact with the rest of the world. And so it's important to understand that a lot of the things, there's so much that we're not aware of that's operating behind the scenes, influencing us on a day-to-day basis, that we really need to start bringing our awareness to them and looking at them critically, right? Now, through my own experience and my own studies, my background is in environmental science, and I've also recently completed a law degree, and I can attest to the fact that within those fields of study and spaces, this anthropocentric worldview is very prevalent, and you can see examples of it all the way through these fields. Now, a little bit more about me. So, this is me. This is me maybe, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And so I just want to highlight what my culture has been like growing up. And in some ways it has been quite similar to a lot of the South Africans that I met. I grew up in a household where eating animal products, eating meat, eggs, dairy was quite considered a normal, natural thing. I'd be going to aquariums all the time, visiting zoos. I would be fishing from a young age. I would spend lots of time in the ocean with a hand spear and fishing and really taking from the land, from the earth, from the oceans. And this was a very important part of my culture growing up. It's something that brought me a lot of joy, that really I felt was fundamental to what I ended up studying, what I ended up exploring as an adult. So I have this natural deep connection with non-human life and the environment, as we all do. Now, as I got older, I started realizing, okay, well, what legacy do I want to leave on this planet? How do I want to interact with and relate to the natural world? And so I did a lot of fishing when I was younger, and up until a few years ago, I was also doing a lot of fishing. I started volunteering with an organization called Sea Shepherd, so I wanted to really focus on volunteering my time to protect the environment. And I started studying environmental science because I wanted to understand what's happening on the planet, what can I do as an individual to protect the environment, protect the planet. So as most people, we want to be consuming the most sustainable products. We hear so much about eat the eco-friendly product, have the sustainable this, have shorter showers, ride your bike, all these ways to minimize our footprint. And at the time, I wasn't paying much attention to the role that diet and the impact that diet has on the environmental footprint. Didn't really think much of it. And so a few years ago, maybe more than a few years ago, I had a girlfriend who was a vegan. And she made it very clear to me, she said, look, I don't know how you can be a meat-eating environmentalist. And I'm like, it's all good, man, I'm studying this stuff, I know what's going on, I know what's the most sustainable, I've got my shit sorted, right? And so she just trusts me, just look into it. I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, I split up with her. A few years later, I started seeing another woman for a short time, and she was also a vegan. And I'm like, what's with all these vegans popping up around me? And I wasn't vegan at the time, and I rocked up to her house one time, and I had a Subway sandwich, right? And there was tuna in there. And she's like, I'm vegan, I don't want this in my house, you have to eat that outside. And I'm like, this is extreme. What do you mean I can't eat my food in your house, right? So I throughout my studies, I started looking more at diet and consumption, and really bought into the sustainability of us and us as a species. So, animal agriculture. Now, the animal agriculture industry is the collective industry combining small-scale organic farming all the way up to broad-scale industrialized farming. So the animal agriculture industry provides us with meat, eggs, dairy, essentially all the animal products that we are consuming. Now this photo here is a photo taken from a drone in Australia, and it's a screenshot from a documentary called Dominion. And Dominion was released last year, and it focuses on the ways in which humans have asserted their dominion over non-human animals and the rest of the natural environment, essentially. So the animal agriculture industry is having a massive impact on our environment. So I'm just going to highlight some of these key facts, the most pertinent facts about the footprint of the collective animal farming industry. So in terms of deforestation and land, the reason why we are having a massive footprint on the land through animal farming is that we often need to clear a particular area of land and it's turned into grass, into pasture. So we're losing natural biodiversity and wildlife, and then we're putting animals on that area. Depending on the country and depending on the region, in other places we are clearing land to grow plant-based food, clearing land elsewhere to house animals, and then feeding that plant-based food to animals, where humans could be directly consuming that food, right? So it's a very inefficient system, putting so much calories and protein in, and we're not getting as much out, right? So in terms of deforestation, we hear about rainforests being destroyed around the globe, right? In the Amazon, 91% of the Amazon destruction can be accounted for and attributed to animal agriculture. Not the mining sector, not settlements that are expanding, but clearing forests to grow soybeans, which are then given to livestock, and to clear areas for cattle, for example. Land use across the whole world, about 1/3 of Earth's total land mass is being used for animal agriculture. A third, right? Livestock covers 45% of the Earth's total land, more precisely. Very, very full on. So these are some big statistics. We're just bringing it to a bit more of a local level. Here in South Africa, over the years, been driving around between Cape Town and Eastern Cape, and a lot of areas look like this. You can see land has been cleared, and there's cattle on there, and there's native vegetation just in the distance. So we're clearing land at an extreme rate to grow plant-based food and to put livestock and cattle on there, and a whole range of other animals. And this is a very common theme in Australia and in other places around the world. Now this is an example of a sort of smaller scale animal farming, but things can be also quite intensified. So this is a Google Earth screenshot that I took which is claimed to be the largest feedlot in Africa, right? And so you can see here, all these little dots. Does anyone have any idea what that is? Cows, yeah. So there's like over 100,000 cows in this area. This is what it looks like from a different perspective. You can just see the extent of how much land is being used and the intensity of animal farming. Now, and this is a feedlot. So what happens is, over around three quarters of the cattle in South Africa will spend some time in a feedlot. They fatten these animals up as much as they can in the shortest amount of time to make them most heavy in terms of their weight, so that way when they're sent to slaughter, they're worth more money, right? Now this is this little square here, rectangle, is actually the field of play for a rugby field. So you can just see actually how big of an area is being cleared up. This feedlot is in South Africa. This feedlot is just outside of Joburg, and from what I've read, they're claiming that it's one of the largest in the world. So very, very full on. So in terms of waste and water use, now we have between 50 to 60 billion animals that are being farmed on the land each year. All these animals need food, all these animals are creating waste, all these animals need water. And so there's a lot of shit coming from these animals, right? So a waste from a farm of 2,500 dairy cows produces the same amount of waste as a city of over 400,000 people, right? Now, what's the population of pig? Around 1.2, 1.3 million. So a herd between 7,000 to 8,000 dairy cows is going to create the same amount of waste as an entire city of pig. Now the relevance of this is that there's barely any laws which require farmers to treat waste. It's dumped onto the ground, leaches into the waterways. That waterways then used to grow other food. That water becomes polluted, it becomes high in nutrients, and it really can lead to all sorts of diseases and bacteria and stuff like that. So in the United States, every minute, 3.2 million kilos of waste is created. Right? Now in terms of water use, as I said, there's over 50 billion land animals, right? So we need to make sure they are thriving, somewhat, so we need water for them, naturally. There's water involved in the growing of plant-based crops to give to livestock. There's water involved in the processing of animals in slaughterhouses. There's water involved at almost every point along this supply chain. And so one little hamburger has a water footprint of around 3,000 litres, okay? Which is equivalent to 2 months worth of showering. Now, I know at the moment in lots of parts of South Africa, the municipality is quite heavy on saying, cut down on your water use, do not use too much water, minimise your footprint. Now, over less than 10% of household water use comes from the physical use of water, in terms of showers, baths, toilets, all that. Around 90% of a household's water footprint comes from the food we are eating, right? Now, the overwhelming majority of... I'll just leave it there for a second. I'm just going to get some water. Give me a second. Okay. Now, we don't see government policies, we don't often see council advice saying, or municipalities saying, hey, if you want to minimise your footprint, actually stop eating more animal products. On average, they're going to have a much higher water footprint than plant-based foods. Now, there are some plant-based crops that have a massive footprint. When you take it all into account, it's having a massive toll on our water use. The meat and dairy industry use approximately 1/3 of our total Earth's fresh water. It's accessible to us, so it's full up. Climate change. Now, climate change. Everyone knows about climate change. It's not as if climate change is a theology. It's fact. It's what's happening. Humans are influencing the natural systems to a point where it's going to drive us to extinction. Extinction is very, very simple. Now, the animal agriculture sector is a major driver of climate change. The most conservative estimates from the United Nations say that there's more greenhouse gas emissions coming from the entire animal ag sector than the entire transport sector. There's more emissions from animals in terms of that whole process of creating food, of the emissions from the livestock, the emissions from the land being cleared, all of that, than boats, cars, planes, trains, ships combined. Right? Full on. Now, the least conservative estimates, we're looking at around 51% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to livestock and their byproducts. Now, with all of these facts, this research was done by a group called WorldWatch Institute, and these little infographics that I provided here all come from a documentary called Cowspiracy, which I encourage you guys all to watch. And as every good scientist, when we see something or we hear something that doesn't really, we're not quite sure, look into it. Do your research. If you find a stat, find what they've referenced and read the article for yourself. Read the research to make up your own opinion. So for a lot of these things, the truth may be sitting somewhere in between. For something like climate change, it's very difficult to estimate these greenhouse gas emissions. It's something that I've struggled with, and there's often a lack of consensus as to how much greenhouse gas emissions are coming from the animal ag sector. But it's more than people realise, and it's so much more concerning than we actually think. In Australia, for example, when you model greenhouse gas emissions over a 20-year time frame, the prevalence of methane and influence of methane, which is a massive driver of climate change through being a greenhouse gas, means that Australia's their national greenhouse gas emissions is around 54% in agriculture. Now, the governments aren't talking about this. And so that's for the entire agriculture sector, that's not just for animal agriculture. So, having a massive footprint on climate change, land use, water use, deforestation, with the amount of land that's being used, with the amount of waste that's being put into the environment, with the emissions, with the loss of habitat, animal agriculture is the leading cause of habitat destruction, water pollution, ocean dead zone, and species extinction. This is black and white. It's very, very clear. With fisheries, the oceans, although they cover most of our planet, they don't get as much attention in terms of the environment compared to the land, compared to forests, rainforests, and terrestrial ecosystems. Now, around 3/4 of our ocean's fisheries are either fully exploited, overexploited, or depleted. Let that sink in. That's not saying, there's some fisheries that are unsustainable. 3/4 of our oceans are at a point where they have already died or they are about to die, and everything is connected, right? For every kilogram of fish caught in the ocean, there's about 5 kilos of bycatch. That's on average across all these fisheries. Although some fisheries have less of a footprint, some have more, these are the sort of average stats. Now, it's quite clear. The United Nations has said meat is the world's most urgent problem, right? and the study, which was conducted by Oxford University recently, was the biggest study and analysis into food production systems in the world ever conducted. It analysed over between 44,000 farms and said, what's their footprint, what are they producing, how they're contributing to environmental destruction. And they found that it is absolutely clear that to minimise our footprint, we need to start shifting our consumption habits away from a diet which is heavy on meat, eggs and dairy to a plant-based vegan diet. The United Nations about 9 years ago has been advocating for this, and they were saying we need an urgent shift in our consumption to address the worst impacts of climate change. Now, the single most quickest, most effective way to minimise our environmental footprint is to adopt a whole foods plant-based vegan diet. We're going to be using a fraction of the land, we're going to be using a fraction of the water, reducing our carbon footprint in a massive way. Now, the sad thing is, not a lot of people are aware of the scale and magnitude of destruction of the animal farming sector. Now, interestingly, I went through 4 years of environmental science and wasn't aware of these facts. So I studied at a university in Australia, which had the first environmental program in our state, if not the whole country, and I wasn't given these facts. So the suppression of information out there in terms of what is driving some of the most profound environmental harms is being kept out of sight. The scientists are not being educated on this stuff. And how many environmental organisations out there are saying, hey, animal agriculture is destroying the planet. You need to change what you are doing in order to have a positive impact for on this issue. So we're experiencing a massive suppression. It's something that has really driven me, which was one of the catalysts to get involved in activism and educational work, was to share my experience and to get this information out there. Because we, as consumers, as people, as earthlings on this planet, we need to be empowered, we need to be educated and understand what's actually happening and make decisions based off that. But if we aren't aware of what's happening in the first instance, then how can we shift our behaviour? How can we change if we don't know what we need to actually be shifting? And so throughout, towards the end of my studies, I started looking more into diet, looking more into consumption. And at the start of 2015, I decided to go vegetarian. So I thought, okay, I'm going to contribute to this by cutting out my meat consumption. Started with a meat-free Monday, soon that shifted to just cutting out all flesh from my diet. Then I watched a documentary called Cowspiracy. And Cowspiracy for me was a massive catalyst because overnight I decided I'm going to go vegan. I'm going to not contribute to the animal farming sector because it's very simple supply and demand. The only reason why the environment is struggling as a result of this industry is because we as consumers on a day-to-day basis are purchasing these products and we need to be held accountable for what's happening out there. The farmers, the industry is providing a product to a consumer. So we have a very important role in that chain. Now we can either have a positive impact or we can have a detrimental impact, and it's about choosing what we want to do with our influence. Okay, now the Impossible Burger. This is an example of plant-based eating. And before I continue, does everyone know what plant-based diet consists of? Most people. For those who don't, it's about not eating anything derived from an animal. So no animal products, no meat, eggs, dairy, like just not eating animal products. So it's lots of fruits, vegetables, nuts, grains, legumes, all that.
Gelatin.
No gelatin, yeah, exactly. And so the plant-based food industry is really expanding. Now, Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat within the last week actually entered into the American Stock Exchange and have performed better than anyone has ever even predicted, right? So the Impossible Burger, because they use 0% cows, they use a fraction of the Earth's natural resources. The Impossible Burger uses 95% less land, 74% less water, and creates 87% less greenhouse gas emissions. So we can clearly have a product which tastes just like, I haven't had the Impossible Burger, that exact one, but I've had so many meat substitutes that taste exactly the same. They don't have the animals in them, and they use a fraction of the environmental resources. So awesome stuff here. Now, a plant-based diet is one aspect of veganism. It's one way that the vegan philosophy is expressed. Now, my main driver for going vegan was for environmental purposes. And interestingly, that's the minority of people who are vegan went vegan for the environment. Right? The majority of people that are going vegan for issues of health and in terms of ethical and moral issues with our use of animals. You're even less likely to become a vegan if you are a man, if you're a male, right? Using the simple binary ways to look at it. And so it puts me in a minority category. Most of the vegans out there are women. And so veganism is not just some fad. Veganism is so much more than just a trend at the moment. It's an entire philosophy and a way of living. And I wasn't aware of this when I decided to go vegan. I just thought, I've got to cut out these products from my diet. Hold on, what's this whole veganism thing about? What else is to this? So it's about excluding as far as possible and practicable all forms of exploitation and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. And by extension, promotes the development and use of the use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of humans, animals, and the environment. And so there's a whole range of reasons why people are going vegan, but it doesn't really matter why people end up going vegan, because it has a positive impact on the environment, and as you'll find out shortly, on the animals and our health as well. So the animals. The animal agriculture sector, as I said previously, is responsible for breeding over 55 billion animals into existence each year, so that way they can be fattened up and then slaughtered for humans to eat their flesh. Now these numbers sound massive, and they are, because these are lives that are being lost through our consumption habits. Right? Now this photo here on the left-hand side was taken in Cape Town a few years ago. Now there's a movement called the SAVE movement, and there's activists all around the world that actually go to slaughterhouses and bear witness to the animals that are coming into the slaughterhouses, to spend a few moments with these animals, showing them some compassion and respect and love before they are sent into a slaughterhouse and come out chopped up into little pieces. Now this is the first SAVE movement event that happened in South Africa, and it was a few years ago in Cape Town. Now 6 million animals are murdered every hour for food. That's what's happening every hour across this globe. These are lives that are being taken, having a knife put across their throat, which is how all these animals are being killed. Massive majority of them. Now, I wanted to make this presentation relevant for South Africans, right? I've spent years looking at the Australian stats, and I'm pretty well clued up in terms of what's happening in Australia. I struggle to find clear information for what's happening here in South Africa. Now, in 3 months in Australia, this is how many animals are slaughtered. You can see 156 million chickens, 5.7 million lambs, little baby animals, little lambs that have their throats slit that are killed so we can consume their flesh. 106,000 calves, sheep. You can see what's going on here. So it's very, very profound. Now, sometimes it's hard to relate to these numbers because we're so disconnected from it. We're so disconnected from what's happening on our plate, to the environmental footprint, to the animals that are being sent to a slaughterhouse, processed, and we are choosing to purchase the product in a supermarket, neatly packaged. We don't see the face of who this meat is coming from. We don't see any of that. So this is a trailer of a documentary called Dominion, which was released last year in Australia. Now I told Sam and some of the crew that there wouldn't be any graphic footage in this. There's a few seconds where things don't look nice, but generally it's not violently graphic. But please, I urge you all to watch this trailer. It's a few minutes long, just to help us to connect to the victims of the animal agriculture industry, which is something that we're so disconnected from. Footage is taken from standard industry practice in Australia, from a country which claims to have some of the highest welfare standards in terms of their treatment of animals. Today, we will see the sun in front. the ways in which we have used and exploited animals, all the industries.
Just let go. Just let go.
Gas chambers where pigs are lowered into.
Burning and bleeding holding on to this beautiful man. Teardrops fall like diamonds in the rain, but today, together we rise.
So that's Australia for Dominion. Now this documentary came out last year and really blew the lid on an industry, a global collective industry which is built off secrecy, which a lot of people are not aware of. If we were aware of the treatment that animals are experiencing, then maybe we wouldn't be supporting these industries. But the way these industries operate is that they're dependent on people not knowing what's happening. But we as consumers, we need to be informed, need to understand what is happening. So this documentary is free to watch online. You can jump online. I would encourage you all to watch this, whether you're vegan, whether you're not vegan, just watch it and understand and connect to what's happening. These are the victims of our choices, and it's something that we need to take into account on a day-to-day basis. And so the footage you saw in that trailer, a lot of it comes from RSPCA-approved humane farming methods, right? Just like you have the NSPCA here in South Africa, where they approve SPCA. SPCA, we have the equivalent in Australia. And so there's so much that happens beyond closed doors that we aren't aware of. Now, can you guys see what's in this blender here? A little chick. Yeah. Does anyone know why this chicken's in a blender? You know? Blending a chicken? Yeah. So this is a baby chick. This is a little male chick. Now, for the egg industry, whether it's free range, whether it's caged eggs or not, the male chicks are considered a byproduct of that industry. They are a waste product. They serve no value to industry. So the advocated and the most humane way to slaughter this byproduct is to put them in what's called a macerator. So baby chicks on their first few days of life are blended up alive through a massive blender. That's standard industry practice, common, legally supported and promoted by the organisations that claim to be protecting non-human animals. So I used to eat like 3 or 4 eggs a day. I had my omelette, my salmon on toast, avocado, tomato, and be like, yeah, okay, I'm ready for this. But I wasn't aware that by purchasing eggs, by purchasing these products, there's consequences for my choices, which we are disconnected from. Now this is a little cat. This is a cute calf, which is at a sanctuary that I visited last year. And this calf was stolen from its mother, presumably within the first week or so of its life. Its mother is what's considered to be a dairy cow. Now, the reason why cows produce milk, as any other mammal, is to provide milk for their offspring, provide milk for their babies. But because we don't want those calves drinking the milk, which humans want to be drinking, the calves are taken away. They're stolen. Now, the females are actually forcibly impregnated 4 to 5 times over the course of their life. Calves taken away. These what's called bobby calves are then sent to be tied up for the veal industry, where they kill baby cows at a young age, or they're slaughtered within the first few days of life. Now in Australia, it's completely legal to slaughter these cows using a sledgehammer, using blunt force trauma. Now I wouldn't be surprised if the same practices are adopted here in Australia, considering Australia has high standards of animal welfare, which no doubt it's happening over here. So as a result of us purchasing dairy products, whether it's ice cream, whether it's milk, whether it's yogurt from dairy source, we are paying for people to take away calves from their mothers and supporting that process. Now, we think, what the hell is happening to animals? Why wasn't I aware that animals are being treated in this way? Why don't we see this on the labels? What's going on? And this is intentional. We have been kept uninformed. We have been kept numb and unconscious to what's happening in the industries that exploit animals, whether it's for purposes of testing, whether it's for food animals, whether it's for entertainment. We don't see the true extent. Now, you can see here, this is the reason why we aren't aware. This is a dairy product. We can see the happy cow in the front, smiling, green fields in the background, has a little bell, it's happy. This cow is happy to be milked, it wants to be milked. We don't see that the cows are actually modified genetically to produce more milk than they naturally would. So they undergo painful infections, and at the end of the day, the dairy cows end up in the same slaughterhouse as all the other cows. Right? So the dairy industry is a massive supplier for the meat industry. They're inextricably linked. Now there's more suffering in a glass of milk than there is in a steak. Simple as that. In terms of that whole process, what's going on, how these animals are being used and treated. But we don't know what's happening behind the facade, and we're sold this narrative of happy animals, humane slaughter, as you will, which is something that was really important for me. As someone who wanted to eat meat, as someone who wanted to make sure that I'm doing my bit for the planet and the animals, I wanted to buy the ethically sourced, humane slaughtered animals. And all the things that I was purchasing, I knew the RSPCA supported this, therefore I'm fine. I feel I can appease my conscience knowing that animals have been treated in a humane way. It's absolute rubbish. They're actually not. This is very, very sad. So, if we think it's wrong to inflict unnecessary suffering on animals, then understand that taste, culture, convenience, and pleasure are not good enough excuses. Sadly, these are the best reasons we have for eating and exploiting animals. We do not consume animal products out of a necessity. We don't live in a society where we have to live off the land, have to slaughter animals to survive. Especially not everyone here in Kindred Kitchen in PE. There's Spar everywhere, there's Pick and Pay, you've got Checkers, all this stuff. You can easily go to a supermarket or your local fresh fruit place to purchase food. There are some people around the world that are dependent on hunting. Some of the Inuits, for example, and Eskimos, and other people who live in isolated areas kill animals out of necessity because they need to. But we need to understand what we're doing is not a necessity for our survival. And for me, these are not good enough reasons to do what we're doing. Now, one of the reasons why animals are being used and treated in the ways that are so horrific is because the law upholds this system. The law allows this treatment to take place. Because the dominant paradigm for our legal system in terms of the way we regulate our use and exploitation of animals is based off the animal welfare approach. Now there's a massive difference between the animal rights approach in terms of the philosophical approach and the animal welfare approach in terms of philosophy. So I wasn't aware that there was a massive difference with animal rights and animal welfare. I just thought it's all the same thing, animal welfare, animal rights, cool. But just to pull this apart, just so we can understand what the difference is. The welfare position states that using animals is morally acceptable. It's okay for us to use and exploit and enslave sentient creatures. That's fine. There's no issue with that. We can use animals for our benefit. Our interests are always more important than the animals because we as humans are superior, we are more intelligent, we can feel pain more, we have emotions, whatever it may be, whatever justifications we are seen as better. We shouldn't cause animals unnecessary suffering, pain, or death. This is under the welfare approach. But have we ever questioned our use of animals in the first place and whether we're eating animals to survive? No, therefore it's not necessary. So all of the use and all the treatment of animals is unnecessary. We should treat animals as humanely as convenient to us. The only reason why welfare laws exist within the animal farming sector is because it's profitable to maintain a clean, healthy product because it's worth more. If animals were dying from diseases and getting ripped apart, and if animals weren't being looked after, then they don't make as much money. It's as simple as that. In contrast to this, we have the animal rights position. Now, animal rights is something that I, since becoming vegan, have become involved with animal rights activism, but used to support organisations that promoted animal welfare. And most of the animal protection organisations out there don't promote animal rights, they promote animal welfare. They say, purchase this product, we're going to put a SPCA tick of approval on this chicken because this chicken was slaughtered humanely and you can count on that. It convinces us to purchase this product if we think animals' welfare is really considered. Now the animal rights position says using animals is morally wrong. Absolutely morally wrong. We shouldn't use animals to benefit ourselves, and we shouldn't overrule the interests of animals with our human interests. We shouldn't inflict pain or death on animals. And additionally, we should always treat animals humanely, which is the basis of the welfare approach. But we should eliminate the human-made causes of animal suffering. And we can account for a lot of that in terms of what we do on a day-to-day basis and the industry that we support. Now, I'd just like to bring you to a setting. We are here somewhere in PE, and you go to your friend's place for dinner. And you sit down at the dinner table, and your host serves this meal. Now, I'd just like to ask you all, what are some of your initial thoughts in terms of how you feel about seeing this lasagna? Any thought? I need some response. Looks good? Yeah? So not most people like, looks delicious, looks scrumptious, man. It doesn't have any cheese, but that's alright, this will make do, you know? And so, You ask the host, you say, okay, this is delicious, what is in this? And the host says, the secret is all in the meat. You use half a kilo of well-seasoned Labrador dog meat. Okay. So how do we now feel knowing that this lasagna is made from the flesh of a dog?
We don't eat dogs in South Africa.
Okay, we don't eat dogs in South Africa. We don't eat dogs in South Africa. Some countries we do eat dogs. Right? So all of a sudden, our perception on how this meal is appetizing to us has completely shifted. Just because of our attitude. If I was to say there was chicken meat in here, or there's cow flesh, you'd be like, yeah, cool, awesome. But actually, it's dog flesh. Or is that the window? This meal hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is your perception and your attitude of what is in this. And whether you find dog flesh or cow flesh delicious or disgusting and not normal within South African society, for example. Now, have we ever wondered why do we love dogs, eat pigs, and wear cows? Now that previous lasagna example ties into this because the reason why we are, most of us feel a feeling of disgust knowing that there's dog meat in that lasagna is because of carnism. As I spoke at the start, we have these anthropocentric worldviews and beliefs, and carnism is an expression of that human-centeredness, where we have been convinced and been culturally conditioned to think that some animals are food animals. Some animals are pets to have in the home. Some animals are pests, for example. Some animals are to be conserved and protected. Now these are all beliefs that I've held throughout my life. I thought that you love the dog, you eat the cow, you protect the panda, you protect this tuna, but you eat this tuna because it's more sustainable. It's all conditioning, right? And so carnism conditions us, and it's an invisible belief system or ideology that convinces us to eat certain animals. Because there's millions and millions of animals out there. But why do we only picture or imagine a few as being edible and the rest are not? Now, in some countries, they are farming dogs for humans to consume their flesh. What is the moral difference between that dog and that cow? The only difference in the value of these creatures comes down to our attitude and our perception, which has been imposed on us over decades of conditioning, growing up in a society where we are told, have your meat and your 2 veg, and you go to the zoo and you eat these animals to be loved and protected. We've all been exposed to it, I have no doubt. This is anthropocentrism in its core. These animals are less important than us, and we have hierarchies, and we are speciesists as a race, as a human species, right? So we discriminate based off the membership of an animal's species. So the laws, for example, in Australia, if you were to cut the tail off a dog because it's getting in the way, or if you were to mutilate and torture the dog in the slightest of ways, that's considered illegal and it's a crime because it's against animal cruelty legislation. If you were to put a parrot or a budgerigar into a blender, which is someone's pet, you'd be convicted for animal cruelty offences. But the same laws that protect domesticated animals do not apply to the 56 billion animals that are involved in the animal agriculture sector. The law makes it acceptable to treat one animal one way and one animal the other, which is why it's still happening. So, we are inflicting massive amounts of suffering on animals. We're having a massive environmental footprint through eating meat, eggs and dairy. But not only are the animals victims of this, not only is the environment a victim, but also human health. So through consuming these products, it's having a deleterious effect on our health and well-being. Now, not many people are aware of this, but recently the World Health Organization collated a massive amount of research and categorized processed meats, bacon, sausages, hot dogs, as being a group 1 carcinogenic compound. These cause cancer. Processed meats, bacon, all this stuff causes cancer. Not does it maybe, it's clear, right? Now red meats, pork, beef, lamb, that sort of stuff, was given a class 2A categorization, which means to humans, it probably causes cancer. Now, why weren't we aware of this? If the biggest, most international leading health organization has said eating these products causes cancer, why don't we know about it? Why do our dietary guidelines provided to us by a government say, have meat, eggs, dairy, have some vegetables, have some grains, and cut down on your sugar? They don't say that because there are links with government and the funding that they receive from industry to promote the consumption of these products. It's no surprise that we've grown up our whole lives consuming these products, thinking it's healthy for us, thinking it's good for the animals, because it just keeps money coming in. Keeps money coming in. Just on this one. So, does anyone know what the single biggest killer of human beings is? Biggest killer? Heart disease, exactly. Atherosclerosis, heart disease, heart attacks, all this sort of stuff. Now, the single, so there's a lot of discussion and debate about cholesterol and the impact that it's having on our health. But we know when we eat saturated fats, the cholesterol within our system is increased, and it thickens our arteries and clogs our arteries, right? Now, on a whole foods, plant-based vegan diet, there is 0 cholesterol. And it's very clear that we can prevent and reverse some of the leading diseases and prevent a range of cancers through adopting a whole foods, plant-based vegan diet. Even if we just look at the leading killer of people, we can reverse heart disease. The medical science is there, the research is there. We can prevent heart disease through a whole foods, plant-based diet. Why do we know about that? All these other benefits of a plant-based diet have really been pushed to the side because we've thought you can't get enough protein, you can't get enough iron, you need milk for calcium. So industry links up these things with our consumption habits. But look at some of the biggest plant-based animals out there. Elephants, vegans, gorillas, hippopotamuses, they ain't struggling with no protein. Right? They get everything they need from a plant-based diet. And we as humans can get everything we need from a plant-based diet. B12 was an interesting one. I also thought you needed to get B12 from meat. B12 comes from bacteria in the soil, right? And the animals will get that from eating plant-based food, eating their grass, right? There's a lack of B12 naturally within our soils, given we've depleted the soil of their nutrients. So the majority of the livestock in the world are injected with B12 to get their B12 levels up. So we can go straight to the source. We can eat plant-based foods, plant-based products, skip out animal sufferings, minimize our environmental footprint, and have a positive effect on our health. It's so simple. Overall health increases, early mortality decreases. Now, I wish when I was younger, someone had said and shared this information. I wish that as a child I was aware that this is what's happening. This is what my consumption habits are resulting in. Now, if I was to take Cody here, even at this age, maybe even a little bit younger, and in front of Cody, I put an apple and a bunny rabbit. And we just allow Cody to do what he wants to do. My money is that Cody is not going to rip the head off a bunny rabbit and start chowing the bunny rabbit and play with the apple. Cody's going to be like, yeah, cool bunny, lekker bro, yeah, eat the apple, right? Because our core is to show compassion and respect and love and kindness. But we have been conditioned out of that. It's very, very scary. And we need to reconnect with those values and beliefs. And those values and beliefs are what I strongly believe fit under that ecocentric worldview. They don't fit in with a human-centered worldview where we disregard other life forms or we objectify and own other animals and slaughter them and kill them and mutilate them. So we really need to be educating ourselves, and it's up to us to do that as individuals. And there's so many documentaries out there that you can learn more about plant-based eating, you can learn more about the animal farming sector, so many things. So Dominion, for example, Forks Over Knives, What the Hell's the Conspiracies. Anyone who has Netflix, there's so much information out there. And watch it. Watch these documentaries, read the research, and make up your own mind. Question every single fact and stat I've given you tonight. Do your own research, figure it out for yourself. I encourage you to do that. For those who are interested in adopting a plant-based diet and exploring veganism, Challenge 22 is a very cool initiative. You sign up and you get free dietitians, mentors, nutritionists helping you with that transition to a plant-based diet. Some people go vegan overnight, other people sort of do it gradually. I don't advocate for example, a meat-free Monday, which is what I used to do. I just wanted to think, okay, I'm not going to have meat on Monday because I want to minimize my footprint, but let's forget about the other 6 days of the week. If we can do one day, we can do 6 days, right? It's very simple. Now, veganism is something that has taken off around the globe. It is something that is just popping up absolutely everywhere, and even here in South Africa. Now, this is a Checkers catalogue that I saw a few weeks ago. A double page spread on vegan products, saying, hey, get some of this into you. We can have yogurts, ice creams, cheeses, milks, everything, but in a vegan version. Same taste, same feeling of, this is good, without suffering an environmental footprint. If we were driving along the street and saw a roadkill, we don't go, oh yum, I want to eat that. We're like, what? No. If we were actually carnivores, we'd be onto that in like 2 seconds. Our bodies would be able to deal with that rotting flesh and eat it and be fine and healthy and thriving, right? But no, we cook flesh, we add condiments and salt and pepper and sauces, and then we eat it, right? Now, I didn't stop eating meat because it didn't taste good. Animal flesh tasted good with all those things on it. But we don't need to have the footprint of animals and all this stuff in as a part of that. Now, Veganuary. Has anyone heard of Veganuary? Some people, okay. Now, it's an initiative where it encourages people to try veganism for the month of July.
January.
January, dude, come on. January, yeah. Vegetober. So, can we see which country was number 6 in the world for sign-ups for Veganuary? South Africa, bro. So out of every country in the world,
usually 67
so out of every country in the world, South African, there were so many people signing up for Veganuary that this is just so awesome to see. So I'm so stoked that the vegan movement is kicking off in South Africa really well, and it's a testament. You know, we're all here tonight to learn about this stuff and maybe to challenge me at the end with some questions and discussion and debate. I'm here for all of that, but things are really shifting across the world, and it's not a trend. It's just veganism is here to stay, and it's about whether we want to jump on board with that or whether we don't want to. So, I'm holding my water bottle. So the way I see it is that through adopting the vegan philosophy as a way of life and the impact that has on how we interact with and relate to the natural world, it's a way that we can live in an earth-centered, eco-centric way, in a way where we acknowledge the connections between us and other species on this planet, where we look at the earth as an earth community, where we realize that, okay, our choices have consequences, and maybe we don't need to be doing all this in order for us to thrive. And so veganism is something that I think is going to profoundly continue to change the world for the better. And yes, there's going to be industry that go, oh shit man, veganism's having a massive footprint, having a massive impact on their sales and their profits. That's fine. But things need to change. We need to diversify our economies. We need to be looking at things in different ways of making money. If money is being made at the expense of human health, at the expense of 56 billion animals, and another 2.7 trillion fish being killed each year, and the environment being destroyed, that shouldn't be acceptable. We should not accept this. So we should be encouraging industries to change through our purchasing power. If we have businesses out there to look at maybe getting those animal products off our shelves, what alternatives can we use? And there's so many out there. So if the eco-centric, if that earth-centered way of view and belief system resonates for you in your core, which my bet is beneath all the layers of humanism, our core is earth-centered. We're here to show kindness and love and compassion for everyone in the world and all life on earth. Then I really urge you to consider the adoption of veganism, because it's so powerful. It's going to shake things up. Now that's a sort of individual level, but we have these earth-centered and ecological principles. But how do we, you might be thinking, Scott, but if I just don't purchase this product, how does that have a massive impact on the rest of the world? How do I make a difference? Well, of course you're going to make a difference. If everyone in here went down to the supermarket and purchased cow flesh or eggs or dairy, you're supporting that industry. The collective impact, the cumulative impact of individual actions is something that is so profound. Question what you are contributing to. Now we want to scale up the protection of the environment. We want to scale up animal protection and defending animals and increase human health and well-being. But how do we start changing the system? Veganism is a way to change the system. In addition to that, in my background in law, I've come across a very interesting thing called Earth jurisprudence. Now, Earth jurisprudence is an emerging field of law that seeks to develop a philosophy and practice that gives greater consideration to nature, recognizing the interconnectedness of Earth's natural systems, the inherent rights and value of nature, and the dependence on humanity and all living beings on a healthy Earth. Now, Earth jurisprudence has its basis in indigenous epistemologies and these indigenous ways of acquiring knowledge. And the indigenous people, even in South Africa, that were living off the land, were super connected. They understood that you do things out of necessity, you could read the land, you can relate to it, but we don't need to be supporting these industries that I don't know where I'm going with that. I'm just going to get back. So much in my mind. Holy crap. So Earth jurisprudence. We are seeing laws around the world that are acknowledging the rights of nature. We are seeing laws that are granting legal personhood to rivers, legal personhood to forests. The Ganges River in India is now a legal person. As a result, about 2 years ago, legislation changing. The Urewera Forest in New Zealand has been granted its own, Earth-centered law. Colombia, Bolivia, Ecuador in their constitution has a particular section which acknowledges the rights of Mother Earth. If everyone can go and read that Ecuadorian constitution, it will blow your mind. We can have Earth-centered principles in governance, in law, in our economies, within our culture on a day-to-day basis. So, very, very exciting developments, and it's something really to look forward to, because most of our relationship and the way we've regulated our interaction with nature has been to own it, commodify it, clear it, to only manage it to the extent that it makes us money. Right? We need to start shifting that away from human centeredness. This is a quote by Albert Einstein, who also advocated for not eating animal flesh, by the way. Go Albert. Look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better. Nature isn't you, your nature. Nature isn't you, your nature. Nature is out there. Nature is everywhere. We are nature. There are species on this planet, and we need to decide how we want to be on this planet. I question, we need to reevaluate our relationship with nature, which is reevaluating us. Questioning who we are, what we believe in, what are our actions? Do our actions and beliefs line up? Because for me, a few years ago when I was a marine scientist, studying conservation, I was also out there fishing and exploring the oceans. I'd go for a dive and see the wonderful marine life and then go get fish and chips. My actions and beliefs contradicting each other. In what ways in our lives do we have that cognitive dissonance? Think about it. For a lot of people, one way that dissonance is expressed is we say we love animals, but we pay people to do otherwise, to treat them horrifically. Thank you guys so much for your time this evening. This is Elvis the cow. Now, I went to this sanctuary last year, which is the same place where I saw the little baby cow, and I had some realizations. I apologized to most of these animals there for the 23 years that I was eating their friends, and eating their family, and supporting industries that meant that these animals suffered. So next time we all come across animals, I hope they're not on a plate. I hope that we are hugging them and showing them some love and kindness and compassion. If anyone is interested in checking out some of the other activism and educational work I'm doing, feel free to jump online. My email address there, my links to Facebook, Instagram, and also some content on YouTube. Thank you guys so much. If there's any questions, discussion, we are happy to fire away.